All right, here we go. So, at this time, we are testing a round of adjustments to underperforming classes that we intend to make with weekly resets February 2 in this region. That is tomorrow. Okay, so I actually have no idea where Frost stands in Raid right now. Let's check Warcraft logs and just look at general statistics for Frost DK. Okay, let's do like 95th percentile. The only issue with 95th percentile in this kind of stuff is Unholy and Frost. It's the same thing with all these specs, right? So like anytime you see Balanced Druid, Fire Mage, you know, Shadow Priest, any spec of Hunter, the best spec of DK, and like the best spec of Warlock, all that stuff, it's actually really, really accurate because a lot of the best players in the world are playing them in public logging. Well, not a lot of the best players, because actually almost none of the best players public log, right? Because like I think out of the top 20 world guilds, maybe like 3 or 4 of them have public logs. But I mean, let's just say just in general. So like the top public log people, so basically world 20 and onward, world 20 and onward are going to have way more accurate statistics for classes that are very popular than ones that aren't, right? So even though you guys see things like BM, Survival, you know, the lower spec of DK, the worst spec of Warlock, very low, it's so yes, they are probably not good, because I think the most telling thing is that if they were really, really good, some of the best players would be playing them, but they're even lower than that. The reason you see such a drop-off is that way less skilled players are playing these classes, like Enhancement Shaman. Enhancement Shaman has very few good players playing it. Same thing with Frost DK and Mythic. Same thing with other classes in Mythic. Because it's just that, you know, if it was better, some of the best players in the world, the best multi-classers and the best guilds would be playing it, and therefore their logs would be higher. So there's a reason why when you look at statistics, there's stuff at the top and it's this massive drop-off where, let's just say, the same level of skill that you see in Balanced Druids in the top of the world for, again, 95th percentile, you would see the bottom stuff be way more near the middle. So the reason I'm saying any of this is because it's it doesn't actually change anything, and the list is usually correct, but it's usually not by this much. Like this class at the bottom is not that. If all the best MM hunters in the world played BM would be higher on this list. Does that make sense? Hopefully you understand what I'm saying. So just keep that in mind when we're looking at all of these classes. So Frost DK with a 5% actually becomes very, very close to Unholy just based on this score. Now keep in mind they do damage differently. I'm not too familiar with how two-hand Frost plays right now. I know that I think one-hand Frost is a little bit better for AoE, like it's just better for like cleave or AoE, and then two-hand I believe is better for single target. Or if it's not better, it's like comparable, but like dual one-handing is like definitely better in PvE because it comes with the AoE as well. But I think people use two-hander for PvP, yeah. So I don't know exactly where all the logs are coming in. I don't know if people are using two-handers. I think a lot of people are actually probably playing two-hand Frost if they're ever playing it, because if you're getting a weapon for Blood or Unholy, you're going to get a two-hander because it applies to all 3 specs. Whereas getting weapons for Frost means you'd have to go out of your way to get those, which is a little worse, right? Okay, so also that was very loud. Coop Wow, thank you for the tier 3, dude. I love that. Thanks, man. I love it. I love that. Okay, so Frost DK by 5% is good, but again, unless they nerf Unholy, it's not going to be a better progression spec for Unholy. What do you guys remember about Frost DK for all of last expansion? It was in the world first kill comp of Gahun until the end of progression. It was in the world first kill comp for us of or not, I guess we didn't get world first in these raids, but like we were very close and we were ahead up until the end. But the point is like we were using it in our comp, and then it got swapped out because it wasn't good enough in execute on Jaina, right? It was okay in Eternal Palace, and it was the same thing in on Gahun, or not Gahun, N'Zoth. We killed N'Zoth with a Frost DK for all of progression because they were so good at target swapping. They had all the time CDs, they couldn't die, they had AMS, they had like all these cool things, and now it has AMZ. So like obviously there's a Frost DK is good, right? But Frost DK always fell behind when the last boss had more of an execute requirement, and Frost DK just fell behind other classes, even though it was like one of the best classes in the game for the first part of the boss. So that's a trend with Frosty K, and that trend isn't different. The reason why Unholy is really good now, outside of obviously AMZ being strong and it being the strongest of the 3 Death Knight specs, is because they have Execute, and they have a really good Execute. So in my opinion, unless Frosty K's single target is buffed to be noticeably ahead of Unholy's, I think Frost is not going to be seen in World First progression, but it'll certainly be very viable for kills after that. But Unholy will still be the King Death Knight until specifically Soul Reaper is nerfed. Because if Soul Reaper is nerfed to where they're no longer a desirable Execute class, Frost is like low-key just like a better spec overall, just for any normal Mythic boss. It has way better on-demand low target cleave, whereas Epidemic requires a bit more targets to be like really potent. And it has like really short cooldowns, so where Unholy's like target swapping and stuff like that isn't as good. So all right, so that is my exact take on Frosty K. All right, Demon Hunter Havoc. So did Demon Hunter need a buff? Yes, but I tweeted about this, and I will show my tweeter. They're buffing Havoc in the wrong way, and anyone who plays Havoc will understand exactly what I'm saying. Okay, my take on Twitter was, be careful buffing Havoc by percent. They need large targeted single target buffs, either through making First Blood a lot better or Chaos Strike. Although First Blood a lot better is kind of a redesign situation, so they probably won't do that. If we start aura buffing them based on their single target damage, their cleave and AoE is going to get out of control real fast. Right now, Havoc does really good AoE. Like really, really, really good AoE. Good cleave too. So all I'm saying is, and I hate that Blizzard balances like this, is a lot of times they look at a class and they look at it on Warcraft logs and they're like, you know what? Havoc should be a little bit better than this. Let's slap a 3% on it, but they don't possess the critical thinking to know exactly why they're behind. Havoc is not down here in cleave and AoE. It's way the fuck up here. It's only their single target that is clearly lacking. This should not say all damage abilities increased by 3%. They should just go to whatever log they can find under Havoc Demon Hunter, find the biggest owner man, this Disarray guy, okay? And then look at his logs for something like Shriekwing or something like Sludge Fist, and look at his actual damage breakdown for single target. Okay, where's this guy's best log? Okay, let's just do this. Okay, look at this guy's log. All right, so their single target is coming from these sources. Buff one of these to where it wouldn't put things out of balance, like either majorly increase the damage or fury generation of Demon's Bite, you know, increase the damage of Annihilation and Chaos Strike, something like that, something that's pure single target, right? To make them better, because that's what they're lacking. My only scare is if they give Havoc a 3%, and then right before the next raid they see low logs on specific single target bosses, and they end up giving them like a 5 to 6% extra aura buff, Havoc Demon Hunter is going to be irreplaceably good in AoE and probably just in general in the raid. So what I would urge Blizzard to do here is understand exactly what a class is lacking, and to their credit, outside of the clear aura buffs that they were like fixated on doing for this patch, they've actually been pretty good at that. They've made a couple of nerfs and buffs to classes so far that like actually made sense. So I hope they look at Havoc. I hope they look at Havoc more for that. All right, BM and Survival. No one plays Survival. I don't care. Beast Mastery looks like it needed a 5%. Again, if we're looking at the statistics, just like we were a second ago, it's gonna, you know, I think Survival and BM are both at the bottom. BM at the bottom is again, no good hunter right now is playing BM. So again, the score is lower than you'd think. And you may think like, oh, but like BM's super easy, anyone can do it. It's like, yeah, anytime anyone says that about a class, oh, anyone can play this class. Like last expansion, people always made that argument. Oh, like, dude, what do you mean Havoc? Anyone can play Havoc. It has 3 or 4 buttons. But I really struggle agreeing with that argument when I know for a fact if any of you who are saying that were in a raid with Evade or Fragnance or Shakib, you know, or X other multi-classing Echo melee player, you'd get dumpstered 100 out of 100 pulls. So don't make that argument. It's bad. So this one being down there because MM Hunter is the primary hunter spec. So keep in mind the other hunter specs will be lower. Survival's maybe the biggest meme class. Not saying that in a derogatory sense, just like people still dedicated play Enhanced, kinda. People still, even before it was super good, dedicated played Windwalker, dedicated played Feral Druid. But, you know, Survival's like, dude, to choose to be a melee hunter is just a very strange choice. It exists. I'm not flaming it. I'm just saying Survival Hunter is probably better than it is because literally no good player I know even has an alt of survival. None of them, by the way. So it's too rare to be on there. So it's probably a little better than that, but it certainly needed a buff. If BM's down there, I think it probably deserves a little bit of a buff. Also, speaking of hunters, has anyone ran into this expansion? I've always found this super interesting. Anytime the meta shifts from BM to MM, I've noticed that a lot of players in your guild, have you guys ever looked at a hunter in your guild and been like, man, you know what? I feel like that guy used to be better. Like, that guy used to not die as much. And almost all the time, if it's a hunter player, it's because you used to watch them play BM and then they had to play a spec that was a little bit less forgiving on their movement. And they just instantly are like worse. I just think that's super funny. Okay, so going on to Mage. Okay, Frost Mage buff. Frost is a weird situation. There's scenarios in WoW that are so important that sometimes a class's overall damage is not as important as what they can do like in a niche scenario. A couple of really popular niche scenarios that you can think of are last expansion, Shadow Priest. Anytime there was 2 to 3 spread out targets, they dominated every class in that scenario, right? One of the most famous ones is funnel damage, which is what we're going to be talking about with Frost Mage. Do you guys remember how good Sub Rogue funnel was on bosses like Zool and in Mythic Plus that season? That was so good. Even though Sub's single target actually wasn't top tier, but their funnel was specifically so good that they ruined that class forever and they just removed it. These are niche scenarios where even if Sub Rogue wasn't the best DPS spec that raid, it was the best DPS spec in that scenario. And that scenario, if common enough, becomes really, really important in raid. And the most important in raid is Execute. Execute is the niche scenario that is most oftenly referred to because it commonly comes into like an end boss scenario and it becomes really important. But funnel is super important. What does funnel mean? Okay, let me explain to you what funnel means. Okay, here we go. Here's what funnel damage is. It's when there are multiple targets out, but only one of them needs to die. And what funnel is certain classes can use not as relevant adds to pump single target damage into one important add. So I'll use an example in this fight. This is not the best example, again, because this boss is something where everything kind of needs to die. So I want you guys to imagine Stone Legion generals, but just with these skirmishers not mattering at all. Okay, so skirmishers are just something that spawn, they don't knock you back, and they don't really do anything. You just basically use them to your advantage, right? So let's say there's 4 skirmishers out and Grishal and a Goliath. Okay, let's say Grishal is something that isn't super important and you'll just cleave him down over the course of the phase. Okay, but the Goliath is the thing that really needs to die. So what funnel is, if you want to equate it to abilities, let's say you have a Frost Mage and he shoots his Frozen Orb into this pack of mobs. He's going to be AoEing all of these mobs, right? But you don't really care about all the mobs getting AoE'd. Like, the mobs that matter for damage going to them, like, these can just die whenever. You're not too worried about them, these little ads, right? They're just here to give him Ice Lance procs, and for that legendary they use, to pump damage into this thing. Similar with rogues, right? Okay? What rogues used to do, when rogues were good, is rogues could Phantom Knives all 6 targets. They would get 6 combo points, and then they would just funnel all of their eviscerates into this one target. They also had something that made their Phantom Knives, I think, increase the amount of single target or something dumb like that. Like, obviously, that's why Sub Rogue was nerfed. This was on Zool, right? So now, this spec is gone forever. And the reason why I'm bringing all of this up and explaining what funnel is, and there's a difference between funnel and AoE. For example, it's possible that another class besides Fire Mage, or besides Frost Mage, does the most AoE to everything. They'll be doing the most DPS. But sometimes the class that does less total DPS, but does more focused single target damage into the one thing that matters, being the Goliath, that's a very niche scenario that's like really, really important on some fights. So the reason I'm saying all of this is that after they buffed Frost Mage by 8 or 9% a couple weeks ago, Frost Mage was already the best funnel spec in the entire game. And now it just got buffed again. So is Frost going to compete with Fire in a single target or mass AoE scenario? No, it's not. But it is it is in the specific scenario of funneling the best class in the game for just single target damage on one target. Or just single target damage to a target with a bunch of adds around it. Frost already is the best spec in the game for that, and it just got buffed again. So you won't see it in logs. It's not flashy, but when you get to a boss next tier, again, use your brain, that looks something like this with important mob X and irrelevant mobs Y surrounding it that keep spawning over and over again. Stuff in the past that you can remember, Zool, Mistress, just adds you used to funnel your single target damage. Frost Mage is going to be insanely good at fights like that. And don't mention Ellie Funnel. Ellie Funnel is majorly nerfed. Ellie's a good class, but its funnel was also nerfed from last expansion. All right, moving on. Enhancement, 3%. Enhancement's actually doing pretty well. In our runs without bugged, so again, when they released the patch recently, they re-bugged Wind Fury weapon. I don't know if they've fixed it yet. So I'm not sure how many of these logs include that, but our Impec, who's main shaman for a long time, is playing Enhance in one of our raids and is actually kind of owning. So Enhance is in a good spot. Again, with all other melee, it's really not as much that Unholy is so insane DPS wise that none of these other specs are close to Unholy, have that execute, or bring AMZ. So like Enhance would be in the raid. Actually, the only unfortunate part about Enhance is I feel like Enhance's raid spot later in the progression, again, just full disclaimer, if you run an Enhance, nothing wrong with that. You can have 5 Enhances. You'll still get Cunning Edge if you're good enough, right? It's just specifically for the most perfectly optimal world first comp, which I'm like obsessed with, right? It doesn't fit into that unless Arms and Havoc become insanely good, because for every one Arms Warrior, an Enhanced Shaman gets them 7% single target. Gives a Havoc Demon Hunter with Demon Blades 4.5% single target. That's a massive buff. That's like better than Battle Shout for them. So if you have enough of those in your raid, Enhancement can be good, but don't just think that applies to other melee. It's pretty dog shit for all tank specs, Unholy, and everything of the like. So Enhance, nice buff, fine, but they're fine. Rogue Assassination, I skipped over it. Question: does Assassination Rogue become the best rogue spec for any niche situation? AoE because of Outlaw? Absolutely not. So it's basically competing with Outlaw single target, sub single target, and specifically 2-target cleave. Assassination has some intricacy where you can do some low combo point ruptures on mobs to get nice energy back, and like you can kind of game how long they're actually going to die. Obviously, a perfect rupture is on a target right until that you want like 1 tick left on your rupture when that target dies, so you get the energy feedback and also the most time out of your dots. So I guess it also has execute, which is kind of interesting. I know it has like that new thing, so it'll have to see. We'll do some damage tests before next raid to see if like their execute puts them ahead. But a 5% buff is good. I'm not sure where they actually show on statistics right now. They're pretty low, but you know, Outlaw's just so good right now. It's going to be really hard for Assassination to ever be good unless it really has kick-ass execute. But even if you're bringing it for kick-ass execute, again, this is just for perfectly optimal comp, I feel like it would have to beat an Unholy execute, right? Because like, if you're bringing Assassination for execute and Unholy for execute, Unholy just has on-demand burst AoE that's insane, AMS, which is cloak on half of a cooldown. It has 10% more health than a rogue. It can death strike through any damage it receives, and it has AMZ. So it's like way up here. So if you're bringing it for that reason, then Rogue still doesn't quite cut it. But Outlaw has really sick AoE, so you could bring Outlaw. But if it's an execute thing, you'd probably bring Unholy instead. Which is kind of the issue right now with a lot of melee specs. Enhance Rogue Warriors, Ferals, some of them are really good. Some aren't. But their main reason they're not in a raid is because they're not as good as Unholy. So, moving on. Warlock, Destro. Okay, so Destro's like really behind right now, but the more Destro buffs there are, the better it is for the spec, obviously. Destro does have a few niches that have been true since the dawn of time, where their 2-target Havoc execute cleave, or 2-target just Havoc Chaos Bolts is really, really good focus damage. Like if you guys remember, specifically the beginning of Raw Den, right? So if I look up our Raw Den world first, what do you guys see? And we did not do any Warlock cheesing. So keep in mind that all of these Warlocks are just doing normal shit. So look at these. Oh, why does YouTube do this? Wait, quality sent. What? Okay. So the first orb spawns. Okay, the voids have already come in. But like the first Vita spawns, look at the Warlocks. the Warlocks just do crazy damage, right? Again, very important. They did have corruption. They did have like flashpoint from the boss being above 80%. So like they had a ton of haste, but the point still stands that when an ad spawns and you have to kill it in a fast amount of time, a Warlock having shards and pumping 3 Chaos Bolts into it, with, or however many they can in a Havoc window, has historically and currently has been really, really sick target swapping for a range. It's actually like the best range target swapping there is, except for maybe a BM Hunter when they're strong, when their pet's in range and they don't have to like run across the room. And maybe Moonkins with like a full Astral Power bar. But Destro still has that, right? So the only issue is that Destro is still a little undertuned, so it can't quite make use of that. But like Affliction has always struggled with that, you know? Affliction is doing crazy damage right now, but it's carried by its tuning. Affliction doesn't really do anything. It's kind of always been that way. Like they do good multi-dotting, but like when is there like really effective multi-dotting in this raid? Like it's not really like spread out multi-dotting that isn't already being cleaved by melee. Like when Warlocks are at their best in progression, it's actually when Destro is doing this much damage statistically, and then they become broken because they're the best class at certain things. Like Affliction right now is at the top because it does a lot of sick stuff, but it doesn't actually... You actually almost did something really cool. In Limit World First Sire Denathrius. So this. When you're in P2 of this boss, a strat that could have worked is if you have 6 Warlocks, I believe is the number, with Absolute Corruption, you could have killed all 4 little dudes. So we jump down and we kill this dude. We jump down. All right, and then FT comes over here and shoots this guy. You could have just hit the boss the entire time, and I think it's 4.5 minutes with 6 Absolute Corruption Warlocks at 220 eye level actually kill all 4 of these mobs with no one else touching them ever. So like there is some Absolute Corruption stuff you can do with Warlocks that's really, really sick. But after that, like Affliction doesn't really do anything. Again, they're strong because they're tuned well, but it's you're much better off in this game being in a position where your class is carried by what it's good at rather than specifically just RNG rolling really high logs every raid. But obviously Warlocks can never complain about that because, you know, you guys, okay, I want to know, do you guys have a Warlock friend where if you make the case that Warlocks have been really good in every raid forever, that one dumbass Warlock friend goes, in Emerald Nightmare, we were like middle of the pack. Hey dude, Emerald Nightmare lasted 17 hours for progression. It was the worst raid of all time. And no one remembers or cares about it. So like, just shut up, you know? Like, if you're a Warlock, just own the fact that your class is always broken. Just own it, you know? It's fine. You can own it. There's nothing wrong with owning it. Just do that, right? So that's good. So Warlocks, again, Destro needs a little buff, but I hope Destro is good because in my opinion, I like Destro being the best class for progression as a Warlock main. Because I think Destro does the most amount of unique things of other Warlock specs, being the small downside that it really sucks to move on Destro. So in that way, it's like a little bit more of a skill cap thing than Affliction, in my opinion. But, you know, I mean, Affliction isn't great either, but I mean, it's a lot better. All right, so that's Warlock. What else we have? Warrior, Fury, and Arms. All right, so Arms definitely needs this. And I've always looked at this way because Warrior is not a class... I think you're making a big mistake if you play a Warrior and you identify as a Fury Warrior or an Arms Warrior. Because I think either spec actually has a lot of things that they're better at different things. Like, for example, Arms Execute is better. Arms, like, 2-target cleave with, like, Sweeping Strikes executes and stuff like that is better than Fury. But it's harder than Fury. It's harder to live than Fury. Fury is, like, way easier to survive. And Fury has vastly superior, like, 4 to 5 target passive cleave on top of where they're standing. Scenarios could include generals. If you want to look at generals rankings, right? Fury's probably, yeah, look, it's a top 5 class, and that's before this buff, and that's with some people still playing Arms, right? It's like it's really good at those scenarios, really good on bosses like Orgazoa, really good on bosses like Zakul from last expansion, both Eternal Palace bosses, where Fury really shines in that scenario. And they're unkillable. They're one of the tankiest classes in the game. So I'm just trying to explain the difference of these two classes to you, because Warrior's one of the few classes that could realistically in a progression scenario, not at the beginning of the expansion, because like we didn't have Fury legendaries, but there's a scenario where you could play Arms or Fury on basically any boss, where almost every other spec in the game is hard committed to one for the entire raid, right? So I've always found Warrior fascinating because of that. And I think that's good. I think both specs could use a little buff. I'm thinking with these buffs, I'm thinking Fury is going to be the go-to spec unless Arms niches are so good that you play Arms instead. Because really, if these two classes are equal at everything, you play Fury, right? Because it's just way easier to live. But Arms is so good in the scenarios it's good at, like Denathrius, right? I don't think they'll ever create a boss in the history of this game that is better for Warriors than Denathrius was for Arms, right? It was perfectly designed for Arms. There's a million knockbacks in which you can charge back to the boss. You can like spell reflect all the shit that happens in the fight. You can, you know, leap to platforms where having movement abilities matters. You can have basically full-time condemn P1. You can almost full-time condemn with sweeping strikes P2 based on all the mobs either going below 35 or being above 80. And then in the last phase, you're like top damage because it's like a 35% execute and a 40% phase, right? So it's just like really, 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 they could not have designed a better boss, right? That's why you guys saw us run Arms Warriors when they were pretty bad for the rest of the raid, right? That was the reason we ran Prot Warrior, was because we wanted the ability to sit DPS Warrior on all the fights it was bad at, basically all of them but Denathrius, and we wouldn't lose the buff. So that's what that is. So that's my opinion on all this stuff. I'll probably make this a YouTube video too, because that just seems like free content. All right, so let me tell you guys what the fuck happened to me. Well, not really to me, to my girlfriend, but by proxy me, when we went to go see my family. So I haven't traveled since the pandemic started, but I haven't seen my family in a very long time. So I decided to travel, obviously took all the safety precautions. If your take is, it's the pandemic, you shouldn't be traveling, just please understand I take it very seriously. Just go ahead and shut the fuck up and not ruin everyone's day. Got it. All right, so we decided to go see my family who lives in Louisville. And we have a, okay, so we take a connecting flight. Number one, connecting flight always sucks. Never take those. We had the option to take a direct flight for way more money, but oh my God, would that have been worth it? Because what ended up happening was we got off, our first flight was late, so we just didn't make it to our connecting. Although we actually kind of did. I was a little mad. We got there 15 minutes beforehand, which is actually according to Delta, because we talked to the service right after it. They said like, yeah, the earliest we ever closed it is 15 minutes early. We're like, well, we were there 15, it was almost 16 minutes early, and the doors were already closed. And they're like, well, yeah, usually they can wait until 10, but they should be there till 15. So the guy came out and was like, yeah, I mean, I closed it 20 minutes before. And we're just like, dude, no, you fucking didn't. Or he said he closed it 10 minutes before. And we're like, okay, you're just lying and bad at your job, but that's fine. So we missed that flight, even though we could have made it, but honestly was like kind of whatever. Like we went there as fast as we could, but the previous flight was late. So what can you do? Connections suck, right? So then the next available flight, instead of it being at 5 p.m., was at 9 p.m. So we're like, whatever. We go to the Delta Sky Lounge, just fucking get drunk in the Delta Sky. Because like, what else are you gonna do? You know, you go in there and it's free drinks, so get free drinks. And then I'm sitting there and I say as a joke, and I kid you not, man, the only way this could be worse is if we get to Louisville and our bags aren't there. Well, I shouldn't have said that. So we go to Louisville and we go up to the baggage place, because keep in mind our luggage got there 3 hours ahead of time. So we know we have to go to the like Delta baggage claim office. And in fact, right when we walk up to the office with the glass window pane, we can see my luggage right there, but no luggage next to it. So we sit there and wait for the Delta guy to come by. The Delta guy comes by and he's like, hey, what's your name? And I'm like, yeah, my name's like Max or whatever. And he's like, oh wait, are you are you on her ticket? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, well, I'm so confused. This lady was just talking really fast and said she was your girlfriend, and she just took that bag, and like, I need to go find her. So then we're like, okay, so this guy didn't ask for ID or a bag tag and just gave my girlfriend's luggage away. And then at first we assumed it was just because this lady said her name was, my girlfriend's name. So we were like, okay, maybe she was just mistaken, because like she's Korean, or like maybe this is like an old Korean lady who just got mixed up with her packaging or whatever. Like, who knows, right? And So we like start looking around for her, and this guy's like, where'd she go? Where'd she go? All right, well, she was in the bathroom the whole time, but when we first checked the bathroom, which is where he said that she was like, okay, so she's just, this is maybe a little bit of foreshadowing, but like she's a criminal, like she's a con artist. She goes in there and she pretends to be the maid, and she has the bag hidden in the bathroom in the back. But she's pretending to be a cleaning lady, so she's just like, yeah, I'm just cleaning the bathroom, like, yeah, I just need people out of the bathroom, if you need any help, let me know, stuff like that. So then my girlfriend, after checking the bathroom, actually leaves because, you know, this person looks legit or whatever. Then we look around the whole airport. This person obviously knows they're caught, so they don't try to leave. And we end up getting the cops involved, and they look at security footage, and they're like, no, that lady went into the bathroom with your bag and never came out. So we go in there. My sister at this point had arrived, and my sister and my girlfriend with a cop go into the bathroom, and this lady's in the back stall, had my girlfriend's clothes thrown everywhere. She was in her toiletries bag. Nothing was stolen, but she was in her toiletries bag and like all that shit. And she was just, you know, the whole go like, oh, like, you know, her name is like, my girlfriend's last name is Park. So like, she's like, oh, well, oh, my name is Parker. Like, oh, I thought you meant Parker. And he's like, yeah, well, what about when I asked you, like, if Max was like the person on your ticket? She goes, oh, well, like the guy I'm with is Barry. And like, I don't know if Barry's real name was Max, and like just all this shit, right? So anyways, she had 2 pending arrests, or she was wanted for 2 crimes. So obviously they arrest her. She's totally full of shit. All right, no, let me get back to you on the Barry part, because I'm sitting here thinking Barry's 100% made up, okay? And just to give you a little bit of like a mental picture, she was fucked up off of her ass on something. Like she was... I don't know drugs enough to tell you what she was on, but she was a drug addict, right? So she's talking about fucking Barry, basically making up her story on how she thought this was her luggage. And first of all, she's fucking dumb because she could have stole it. By the way, all of our Christmas presents are in this bag. I got my sister a $300 pair of headphones, my mom a fucking brand new HomePod. You know, I got them all like pretty nice gifts, and then like that was about to be stolen. She could have just left. But instead, she decided to go in the bathroom and fucking use toiletries or something. Like, I don't know, but... Okay, so we go outside. And we get the bag, and we're like, man, this is crazy. And I'm like, oh, shit, just in case I need to contact Delta, I need to go back inside. Don't say I'm doxing her by saying her last name is Park. My girlfriend is Korean with the last name of Park. Fucking good luck looking that up if that's what you care about. Because there's a fair bit of those. So I go back in. I'm like, okay... I need to go get this police report number just in case Delta wants to know. So I go back inside, and guess who's there? Fucking Barry. Barry's real. So Barry's sitting there talking to the cop with this girl in handcuffs sitting on the chair, or sitting on a bench, and fucking Barry's like clearly a criminal too, because this motherfucker comes down here and starts talking to cops. He's like, hey, want to point out, I'm not doing anything illegal. I came here, I wouldn't have came down here if I thought something was going wrong, or if I was in trouble. Like, I'm just here to support her. And I'm just like, dude, is that not the most criminal shit to say of all time, to walk up to 2 cops and be like, hey, I'm not doing anything. Okay, but anyways, yeah, this girl's on the bench, and then they were trying to go through their elaborate story, and then the cop just asked them simply, both to their face, okay, if you all weren't here to steal people's luggage, we just looked at the security footage. What have you guys been doing here for the past 4 hours in the baggage center? And then Barry collects his thoughts and just goes, well, honestly, I don't want to get our stories mixed up, so I'm going to let her tell it. It was kind of complicated. I'm like, dude, I have no idea what they're both doing here, right? But like, clearly they're just trying to steal people's shit. Yeah, I don't know. I just got such a kick out of the fact that Barry actually existed. I don't know what Barry's role it was in all of it, but yeah. Anyways, that's my luggage story. I think that might be the end of it. Oh, that's not the end of it. So then I publicly complain about Delta on Twitter because that's fucking ridiculous. Delta messages me, and I'll show you the tweet. So they respond just like anything responds. Or just like anyone responds to any tweet here. So I say like, blah, 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 blah. Holy shit, how the fuck could you do that? And then Delta does the usual damage control Okay, thanks for reaching out to us, Max. I'm sorry I'm sorry to hear you didn't receive the level of service you expected from us. If you could, please DM your confirmation number, full name, and email address for review. Okay, that's the person's name. All right, cool. So I'm like, fuck yeah, they're probably only responding to me because I have a check mark, and that's super fucked up, but, you know, fuck it. Let's see what you guys got. So this is Delta's conversation with me. Okay, I gave them the info up here. I said, here's the police report. There's the number. They said, thank you for verifying this information. I'll be transferring your full conversation to a baggage representative who'll be happy to assist you, Lisa. And then I respond a day later, is that going to be in this conversation? Later on that day, help. And then Saturday, so I'm guessing this just isn't happening. Now it's Monday. Little bit of, just, if you could have guessed it, still hasn't fucking responded. So just if you guys want to work with Delta, and just letting you know, if anything goes wrong, you will be absolutely fucking screwed. Got it?